Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome back to another episode of Naked Sunday. I am your host, Caleb Nelson, and I've got my new friend, John Petrelli, on the podcast today. John, welcome to the show, brother.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for providing a platform where people like myself can tell our story and, transcend a message out to people that may need to hear it. So I really appreciate you offering this opportunity, and I look forward to just chatting with you, bro.
I don't know if you have listened to any episodes,
I
but like
have.
even you saying, then you would know that I start my episodes with why I appreciate my guest. And this is like the second or third time I've kind of heard you share that notion. You're so service minded. You want to share what you've got so that other people can benefit from just your experiences, from your life. And you were so open, even just saying before, hey, I'm an open book. Ask me whatever you want. I think there's so much humility. I think there's so much grace in that type of approach to life. And I'm just so grateful. Like, and plus we were connected through a friend of mine that I also think the world of. So like any friend of his is a friend of mine because like attracts like. But I just wanted to commend you for just being that person because I just value that. We need more people who want to have a positive impact and lead from that place of integrity. They don't just say it; they're doing it and putting themselves out there and really being free. So, thank you for being you, brother.
Oh, that's very kind. I appreciate that. But, in all honesty, I think part of me is that way because I was on the other side of the table at one point and I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't that forthgiving, and I was a lot more selfish, and I was more about me, me, me. And I had some pivotal points in my life much earlier on where I had to make that 180-degree flip because I wasn't happy with the way my life was going and understood. Well, I didn't even really understand it. I knew I had to change, but once I got into being of more of service and helping people, man, I found out that I got 10x back in that in so many ways that I had never foreseen, and it's changed my life. So being on both sides of the table, I definitely wasn't Mother Teresa early on, and nor am I now. But it gives me perspective, right? It gives me that I understand both sides of the coin. So if there's somebody out there that is like that's so foreign to me, or may what we're talking about may not sound familiar, it didn't sound familiar to me at one point. And so I'm really honored that you would point that out. And I thank you for that.
No, my pleasure. And I think what I love in all that is I think one of the greater tragedies in life is the loss of hope. When we go so far in one direction, and I like to believe it really is this, we're so misaligned with our purpose because we've lost our sense of self. If you don't know where you're at, you also kind of just floating in any direction. Anything that's kind of usually surface level pulls you. And then you get to a point where there's a hopelessness, and then we just give up. But like just sharing that, and I know we're going to get into a little more of your story today, giving people that glimmer of hope of, oh, I can keep going. And if I just put enough work in, if I put enough effort in, if I'm consistent enough, long enough, eventually there's going to be a domino that falls, and I'm going to be on the other side of it, and I'm going to be okay. And not only can I be more than okay, it could be great, and I could be living truly in alignment with myself. So I just love everything you said there, and I'm super excited for people to hear your story because I think that's going to be really fun. Um, but before I go there, you know yourself better than I. I want you to give yourself the opportunity to share, who you are and all that kind of stuff. So, to that effect, John, who are
Sure.
you?
So I have been for the last 30 years a fitness trainer for over 30 years, helping people live healthier lives in a lot of different ways. At first, I thought it was all physical, but there's such a mental capacity to that. And there's such an importance to mental health and wellness that if we don't have that, you can have the best, you can have the best computer system in the world, but if it doesn't have that hard drive running it, it's not going to go far. So I've been for 30 years really living in my vocation, in my passion of helping people. And as I kind of alluded to early on, is that I found that they helped me as much, if not more, than I helped them as I followed them on this journey of wellness and health. And I'm recently an author, a best-selling author. I'm a father of two amazing boys. My sons Hunter and Rocco, who are 9 and 12. My beautiful wife Cheyenne. And I've been a fitness trainer to some notable people in Hollywood, to some athletes, but more than anything, I've been a fitness trainer to just average everyday people like you and me that just want to feel better or wanted to walk the aisle at their son's wedding and do it without a cane. And yeah, that's kind of what I've been up to for 30 years of my life, and I love it. And I'm just looking for bigger and better ways to help more people so I can communicate more effectively and just get the message out that, man, all things are possible.
Mm. I wanted to lean into one of the things you said in there that I know I've experienced for myself, but I don't know how many people really pick up on it. And I think it's a lost element in this, especially in the act of service. And you said, I feel like my clients have taught me more than I've taught
Mm,
them. And it seems so ironic. Like they're coming to you for guidance and, tutelage or whatever the thing is. But what I think most people forget in the act of coaching, it's a lot more about listening than it is about telling. And to like what you were just saying, they're sharing their stories with you, and you're inevitably, like you mentioned before, you're shifting their mindset. Like, cool, we're gonna do some fitness stuff. Yeah, that's got to happen. We got to do the work, the physical stuff to lock it in. But the mindset stuff, they have to give that information to you for
yeah.
you to be able to help them pivot, reframe, shift, so they can get back to just doing the work that they said they wanted to come there for, at least the external stuff that they said they were driven by. That internal stuff is so cool. Tell me a little bit more about some of those things that your clients have taught you. And then don't worry,
Yes.
I want to get into your story because
Yeah, no worries. So I think no matter who walks through the door, right, when they're looking for help, the first thing they've taught me is bravery, because it takes a brave person to go, I need help. And at some points in my life, I wasn't that person where I could admit that I needed help. So just walking through the threshold of the door to see someone and to admit that you might need help takes bravery. You have to overcome fear. So they taught me just in that essence, like, hey, if they can do that, if I have somebody that needs my help so bad that they've come past all these different mental reasons. There's 500 reasons of why not to come in and see you or I or somebody else. And they've really grasped that reason of why to do it. So they've taught me bravery. They taught me something you just brought up, which is listening, right? We have to listen. And sometimes the most powerful thing I can do, I believe, for someone is let them have the realization of their own conclusion as opposed to me telling them. But we just investigate with some questions. And when they can hear their own voice echo of whether it's why they're really there or what they really want or what they're truly seeking in life, and they say it from their own words, is so much more powerful, I believe, than me going, you should do this or you should do that. Like if I ask a simple question to someone and say, hey, do you think you can shift and make a change in some of your nutrition? Why do you feel like this is so hard? And they start going through the process and they go, you know what? Now that I think about it, of course I can. It's not that hard. There's a lot of power in that. It's very impactful. So they've definitely taught me listening. They've taught me bravery. They've taught me compassion. They've taught me humility. They've taught me to be less judgmental. They've taught me to welcome people with open arms. And I feel I've gone on so many different journeys. If people have broken down the barriers and allowed me into the intimate parts of their life, whether, it's why they can't sleep at night or why they find it difficult to eat or why they may gravitate towards something like maybe drinking too much or whatever it may be. And they've really, really shed some light on what is possible for me as a coach and what is possible for them as a client.
like especially just the way you talked about letting the words coming out of their mouth, and when it's somebody else's idea, when it's their own idea, it's you said it's so much more impactful. It's empowering. And I think what you illuminated very well in that is they actually know the answer,
Yes.
which is weird because why would you go to somebody else to pay them to come like to get the thing that you already know? Apparently, it it's obvious that we this always gets me to the point of like anybody who thinks I am a rock, I am an island, you can do stuff by yourself. Mm, sure, until you really want to go the distance. That we get so clouded by stuff, by judgment, by I'm sure you've heard this before, but it's one of my favorite quotes, like kind of especially in the fitness world, is like trying to change somebody's diet is trying to change their religion, because there's so many dogmatic beliefs out there. Name your ism with veganism, or
Mhm.
carnivore, paleo, like all the stuff that's out there, keto, everything out there, and it's so dogmatic. This one's right and this one's wrong, and they're all conflicting, and that person just gets so lost from even 90% of humanity. It didn't even take the first step, at least in Western culture. They didn't even take the first step to like maybe walking more, having maybe more fruits and vegetables, or having they haven't even taken the first baby step, and they're being bombarded with this other stuff. And a great question like you asked, like, hey, what do you think about changing your nutrition? What do you think you could do that illuminates, like, I guess I could do one of those simple things that I already know. Like I said, you did such a great job of illuminating the fact that they know the answer. And it's heartbreaking, I think, at the same time, to realize, wow, they stopped trusting themselves along the way. They stopped listening to their own voice that has some innate knowledge and has some innate like wisdom about them. That was really really insightful from that, and
Yeah.
especially that bravery thing. Sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, no, go ahead. And what I was going to say is I've been there myself. I've been there
Mm.
myself. And, I have coaches. I have jujitsu teacher. I've been in martial arts forever. When I played sports, I had coaches. I have people that train me in speech and how to talk appropriately. So, we're all students and we all can be teachers also. I can learn something from everybody and someone can learn something from me. And you brought up a great point earlier. I feel like if it's something, and this is something I'm working on, Caleb, and I had to learn, if it is a task or a goal or a dream that I can handle individually, it's probably not big enough. It's probably not big enough. I probably need to seek some counsel, some advice from someone, some professionalism from someone, something that they specialize that I don't. I'm like in the Stone Age when it comes to technology. My kids, who's 12 years old, know much more than I do. So I have to go, hey, can you design my website? Can you do this? Because it's just, I can't be the master of all crafts, and nor do I want to be. So why not go and seek someone that can do it in a half hour, which would take me 3 or 4 days to do in efficiency? So I really feel like if your goal is achievable solely on your own, you probably need to advance to bigger goals down the road. No one man can do it on their own. No one woman can do it on their own.
I've never thought of it from that perspective in terms of goal setting. I really like that perspective. It just put a nice little tweak on it. Yeah, you're not asking, essentially, you're not asking big enough questions of yourself if you just say, yeah, I can only do it by myself. When you inevitably have to of ask support of others, you are thinking, I think that you're thinking about impact at that level, because it does have to go beyond you, and there's going to be a ripple effect of your involvement in those things. Wow, I really like that. That might float itself somewhere into the title of this episode, because that was real.
Well, I'm
If
glad,
you
man. It's
that
something
was
I had to
cool.
come to a realization recently myself, because I've been a one-man show. We're seeing 8 to 10 people a day. I can't really see at 51 years old. I hate to put limitations on myself, but at the end of the week, if I see 40 to 51 hour sessions, that's a lot. I feel drained. And then there is things where I could have been delving into other areas. So it's like, okay, this ship needs to grow. I need to bring other people on. I need support in here. Jeff Bezos doesn't do it by himself. Any corporation doesn't do it by themselves. Think about how many working parts there are. And so maybe it was my own ego in the past, or maybe I wasn't dreaming big enough or thinking big enough, or a combination of all those things. But man, bring people on board, get a support system, get a team, collaborate. And one thing that I really have come to realize is I don't want to surround myself with people that just agree with me. It's great if we agree, that's fantastic. But I always want to be open to another point of view, because I stop learning the second I think I know everything. And the second I'm like, I got this all figured out. No, show me a better way. Teach me. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. But from the mouths of babes, some of the simplest things can come from areas you don't even know. And just keep your mind open to other points of view. because it can change and mold your point of view, or it can strengthen your point of view and go, no, this way, really, I think it works better. And this is why. And I'm okay with that. Or, man, you have some great insight on that. Let's take that little tool from what you're adding here, put it in my tool belt. And now I have another tool in my tool belt. And pretty soon I'll be a hell of a carpenter. I've never said that before, man. You can coin that if you want. It just came.
It's yours, brother, but I will probably put that in the clip for the teaser of this one. I like it. I like it a lot. You got some good one-liners in there. That's really good. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a real act of love as well in saying, I'm going to let you hold me accountable in some way, shape, or form of like, and I think a lot of people still need to also get clear on that in that, in the way I think about it is you don't want everybody to think the same way, but you want to come from the same value structure. Like, hey, we all espouse kind of these ethical, moral types of things.
Agree with that. Yep.
But different mind allows us to see this same thing from a slightly different vantage point. I heard somebody, I was at a seminar, they said, uh, same heart, different mind. And I loved that
I do
because
love that. That's good.
I think it opens that up. But you're right. How do you simply can't see the thing? And I have like my mug, but usually I do like a mug thing. It's like, yeah. Did you watch Ted Lasso?
No, I've never seen it. I heard it's great though.
Okay, that's my favorite show. Um, there's this moment. I'm not giving anything really too much away, but they drop a. He's got a thing with these plastic soldiers. Drops it in a mug. I use it like because it was my play on you can't read the label from inside the bottle, and I think it's a reference to like those toy boats that they put them inside the glass bottle, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like, well, of course you can't. So say you drop a plastic soldier inside of like your coffee mug, you can't read the label on the outside of the mug because you're within it. And once we think about that, well, no matter how smart you are, you're going to pour. There's also going to be the turmoil of life, like pouring in the coffee.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to lose sight of what's going on, and to have somebody who's outside of that, who's not being burdened at least in that moment by your current stressors, to help you see clearly.
Right.
And it's such a gift. It's such a gift. And we could struggle and froth around in our own coffee. I guess staying on that metaphor here, but it could be a lot more pleasant if you just have somebody be like, "Go there, you'll be out in like 2 seconds." It'll be a hell of a lot more pleasant.
Right. I like that. Yeah, I've never heard that.
Yeah, which begs an interesting question of like, why do we like to suffer so much extra? I think there's something weird about that. That
Mm-hmm.
there's a guilt around about feeling pleasant, if you will. And I'm thinking more of pleasant in the sense of like in a flow state where there's just enough challenge where you feel like you're doing something, but not so much that you're just completely overwhelmed and just, trying to push a truck up a hill. Like you're not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
There's that fine balance. I think there's a weird guilt of learning how to back into that with that. I don't
From
know where
my
it
own
comes from.
experience, I can't speak for other people, but I found significance in the struggle. And so the harder I worked, the more significance I would feel like, look at how hard this was. And I was able to overcome it. What I've come to learn is, man, life is going to bring you enough stuff anyway. Let's not go look to make it harder. I'm going to work hard no matter what. And I don't need the job to be super hard to feel significant. But I have a goal on hand, and whatever path takes us to get there, we're going to get it. We're going to look for the most efficient. And if it happens to be super challenging, we know we can make it, but we don't need to make it more challenging than, if you had an air pump and you could fill up your tires, fill your damn tires up. You don't need to be running around on flats all day. Right. And head
That was a
there.
better analogy. That was a better analogy than
I
mine. I
just
like
made that
that.
one up on the spot too, brother.
Oh my God. It's so interesting how fitness opens the door to all of these things. And I really think anything opens the door to all of it. Let me reframe it. We both happen to obviously love fitness, but choosing to solve one problem and then engaging in the discipline of doing that,
Mm-hmm.
you start to realize how no one pursuit is separate from all the other things. To change just the one thing, you must in fact change all the things. Because everything
Mm.
you talked about, these are overlapping principles,
Yep.
whether it's in a marriage or a business or in your health transformation. And all of those things are going to be tapped into because you evolve through life. And yeah,
And they
yeah,
all have a common thread, which is consistent hard work over time, right? Whether it is your fitness, man, Lord knows you could talk to my wife anytime, Cheyenne, consistent hard work in our marriage. Nothing comes easy that's worth it. Not from what I've found, so you got to be willing to work in all areas, do it consistent over a long duration of time to get things that are worthwhile.
hard to say, especially when you're starting off. Like the get rich quick thing is, I think everybody has to go through that in some way, shape, or form to
Mm,
realize it's not a real thing. Anything you see on TV where somebody their business was that overnight success, like you forgot the 15 years before that,
right.
where they were just, you know, sleeping in their mom's basement and working out of the
Yep.
garage or whatever. Like you missed all the other stuff. Yeah, maybe they pivoted to this right thing and everything then aligned, but there was a lot of other foundational stuff going in there so that when the opportunity showed up, that long game, this long term approach of the consistent hard work, man, there's no substitute. It is what it is. It really
That's,
is what it is.
I agree. I have a dear friend of mine who's a stand-up comic, and he's one of the number one probably in the world right now. Sold out Madison Square Garden more than Eddie Murphy, more than Seinfeld, and a lot of people still don't even know his name. His name's Sebastian Maniscalco.
Yeah.
He just did a movie with De Niro, great friend of mine for over 20 years, and
Wow.
he was close to being no, he was in his 40s before it happened to hit for him. And I know this from I was in his wedding. I introduced him to his wife. I went on tour with him for a couple of years. So this isn't hearsay. This is first life experience with him. And, he was just grinding year after year, day after day, working as a waiter and doing a 15-minute set in between on his break from waiting at the Comedy Store. And then, when he finally hit it and they're like, overnight sensation. And he's like, yeah, 20 years overnight, right? It just happened to hit when it hit like that. But there was so many trials, so many different things that didn't work, so many things that he failed at, but just kept going after it. And then when it hits, everybody's like, where did this guy come from? Or the newspaper prints, overnight sensation. They had no idea, of the thousands and thousands of hours just consistently working on your craft.
That's pretty cool. I have a friend up the road. Sebastian's actually his favorite comic. He was telling
Oh,
me
really?
he's a Raven. Oh yeah. So I'm like, I know exactly what you're talking. I watched his special not too long ago.
Yep.
Very cool. Wow. That's again, regardless of the discipline, regardless of the industry, the same concepts
Yep.
apply. You're not there's no skipping any steps. It's gonna be what it's gonna be.
Yep.
Let's get into your story because you brought
Sure.
out a few cool things. I think we're going to be able to dive in and out of them. But like, tell us how we got here. Tell us the journey.
Yeah, so you and I got here through a common friend, Brandon Eastman, and I was telling my story to him, and he thought that, man, there would be some synergy and with your audience and whatnot. So I grew up in upstate New York. My parents are immigrants from Italy. I'm first generation Italian American, and man, when I go into this story, Caleb, anybody that's listening to this, I want them to understand clearly that I don't blame anybody else for my actions or my inadequacies. I'm going to describe things and I take full responsibility for them. At certain points in my life, I didn't have the mental capacity to make certain positive choices and I made some bad choices, and I take full responsibility for all of that stuff. My parents are wonderful. My mom's actually here visiting me in Texas right now. She's 80 years old. She is 4'11" ball of passion. She's in the kitchen right now cooking. She'll be cooking 24/7. I think I told you when we first met that if you came to visit me, or maybe I didn't, you will leave about 12 pounds heavier after a weekend because she's going to feed you. She's going to fill you with joy and laughter. And that woman has saved my life. She is one of my absolute best friends and my favorite people on this planet. And thank God I got a lot of traits from her. And I also got a lot of blessings from my father in different ways. My dad was born during the Depression. He was born in 1921, and he didn't really have a father. His father left his family on the side, no one knew, and had another family on the side. And when my dad found out, he was a teenager, and it really crushed him. And a lot of what I'm going to tell you, I had to find out after my dad passed because he didn't really communicate these things. Maybe it's the era he grew up in. Maybe it's male machismo. Maybe it's just individual to him. But he went into the military at 18, back in the 20s, right? 30s when he went in. And the military raised my dad. And he was in World War II, he was in Korea, and he was in Vietnam. So really, his learning experience was through warfare, through the military. And none of us get training in being a parent, right? No one is perfect. And my dad did the best he could with the tools he had at the time. And so I don't blame him for anything. He did the best he could with what he had. But he grew up during a lot of violence in the military, seeing war, stuff he never spoke of. And until the last 1 or 2 years of his life. But that transcended in him being more of a general to me as opposed to a parent or a father. And he never said, my dad never uttered the words, I love you, or even called me son until I was 21 years old, 20, 21 years old. And it doesn't mean he wasn't a great provider. It doesn't mean he didn't do a ton of things for me, but affection, love, those things may have been seen as a weakness to him because in his world growing up, those things could mean life or death, right? Bullets are flying over your head. And so that lack of communication, he had certain anger issues transcended to me to a lack of communication, frustration, fear. I feared my father so much that I would feel, number one, fearful to ask a question. Number two, if it was the wrong question, I would feel like I was dumb. And so that went into my grades. It started transcending and bleeding out into different areas of my life. And it's not good to live in fear. It's not good to live in anger. And that ultimately led to violence when I was a teenager. And I had nowhere to lash out at home. I didn't have the ability to communicate. I didn't, to my friends about this, I didn't have the self-confidence to let anybody know this. And so a lot of violent things happened at my hands that I feel very guilty for. And I say I was mentally paralyzed at that point. Yeah, I could throw a punch, but my mind was stuck. I could tackle somebody, but my mind was frozen. I could understand that I probably should change my peer group, but I didn't have the bravery to even verbalize or, say that or do that. So at 18 years old, after having horrible grades in high school, I mean, I literally had teachers pass me because they were tired of seeing me. I had dyslexia, was my diagnosis. It was so frustrating to get, they provided tutors for me. I would still fail. So I had all these frustrations, like I was never good enough. And that unfortunately led to violence. And in particular, one act I'll talk about today was a violent act where I almost killed somebody. And it was at an event called Fireworks Over Utica, and a whole thing went on. And without all the details, I basically, in a split second, someone was going to strike one of my friends. And I didn't even think twice about it. I pushed my friend out of the way and I kicked this individual in the face. And they went unconscious and they fell and their head cracked open on the street curb. And they were laying there motionless. And shamefully, for a split second, I felt so good about myself. Shamefully, I felt brave and I let out like a primal scream when that happened. And then when I started having a realization of what I did in my soul, in my gut, I felt horrible, but I can never let anybody know this. All my friends were standing around. And somebody grabbed me from behind. There was a big melee of people. And I went and turned to confront that person. And that person was unfortunately an undercover police officer that had seen everything that had happened. And he put a handcuff on my right wrist. And I went to go swing on this individual. And needless to say, it doesn't go well when you start attacking a police officer. So here I am at 18 years old. I'm about ready to go to the only community college that would accept me because my grades were horrible. I get slammed to the ground. My ears are ringing. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I possibly could have killed somebody. And Caleb, in my mind, for probably 5, 6 years before that moment, I had always thought that I would end up in jail or I was going to end up dead at an early age because I had such anger issues. I had such lack of communication skills, and all these things lived inside my mind, and I didn't allow them to come out. I had no one to talk to. And I get arrested. I get put in jail. Before any of that happens, I'm sitting in the back of a cop car and I'm selfishly thinking about what is going to happen in my life while there's an individual unconscious on the street. And I'm praying and I'm trying to think about how can I possibly change my life. I'm so unhappy. And, you know, am I going to end up in jail for the next 10 years? And the police try to revive this individual unsuccessfully. Then the ambulance comes and the fire department come and they're unsuccessful. They end up putting me in the back of a police van. And there's a whole story. It's in my book. We can get into it, or you can check out the book. But this individual that I struck, his brother was there, and he gets arrested, and they put him in the back of a police van with me, and I get escorted off before that person even is, while they're still unconscious, to get locked up and get fingerprinted. And it was a pivotal point in my life. I wish I can sit here and tell you that it was the ultimate changing point, because it wasn't. Because I had a super hard head as a kid and I needed some other things to happen to change my life ultimately. But this was a directional change where I was conscious that I needed to change my life, that I was unhappy. And I started pulling away from my peer group. I started hiding in the gym, and that's where I really got into fitness and putting my anger towards something positive. I started being able to at least verbalize to certain people in my life that I needed to change my world. And I've worked my way through the court system. Thank the Lord that this person lived and they came to. I ended up going to community college for 2 years. There was a few more incidents that really changed my life. One was where an individual that I got in a fight with had said he was going to kill me if he ever saw me again, and he was known for carrying a gun. And I was at my wit's end. I had finished 2 years of college. I had a couple $100 to my name. I didn't have many options. I couldn't go out anymore because I was afraid I was going to get shot. And I made a phone call to an individual that changed my life when I didn't have many options. And I'm internally grateful. I called a friend of mine, Daryl Hagan, who lived in California. And I said, listen, brother, I'm going to end up in jail. I'm going to end up dead. And I'm not far from it. I only have a couple $100. Is it possible that I can come and stay with you in California? And he lived with his uncle that I ended up calling uncle, even though he wasn't, Jimmy Treen. And he said, look, we don't have any room at my house, but if you're willing to sleep on the floor, we'll take you in. And so with a couple $100, I packed my one duffel bag, and within 2 weeks, I bought a ticket and I was on a plane. And this is back in the day where there was no TSA. And my parents drove me to the airport, unbeknownst to the depth of all the things I was going through. They knew we had to go to court. They knew all of that, but they didn't understand the turmoil I was going through. And they brought me to the airport and walked me to the gate. And that is the first time that my father, when I had spoke of earlier, called me son. And he said, I love you. And I knew he knew that there was a lot going on in me. And for me, it meant the world to me, and it was the start of the change. As I got on a plane and I headed to California, I felt the weight of the world start dropping off my shoulders, because I had developed this ego. I had developed a persona of being this person that is known for fighting, is known for violence, and my exterior didn't match my interior. And I got on a plane to a place where I can have a new start. And that's where I got into going to California, changing my life. In 1990, man, we're going way back. Most of your listeners are going to go, I wasn't even born then, but I'm talking back in 1993, 94, where I became a fitness trainer. And it evolved over time. And I started going on the other side of the table, having a realization that I want to go from being this selfish person that dealt with violence, that dealt with fear, that dealt with anger, to being someone that is helping people and contributing and asking people how I can help as opposed to how I can take away. And that's where I started going on these journeys with people, and they invited me into their life. And I started working with people as a trainer and literally saved and changed my life. And I know that's a lot of talking without taking a breath, brother, but I'm glad you could be
I
part of
enjoy
that.
it. I say this
So
all the time. I like to talk a lot, but I like to listen just as much. I had to learn that one along the way. Holy smokes, man. Yeah, wow. Wow. It's so powerful to hear you articulating these emotions, these feelings that you felt like in a split, but like without the tools. I think that's what I'm starting to learn. Most people don't feel, uh, I'll go even one step further. I have come to learn that most things are not done in malice, it's done in ignorance. And
mm,
sometimes ignorance is the lack of, and that's not even my saying. I took it from somebody else that shared it once. I didn't understand it fully at the time, but now I continue to see how it shows up. Most people don't have the language, the awareness, the prerequisites to know how to navigate certain situations, whether it was because their parents did or did not teach them that, and or their peer groups or whatever. And we spend this lifetime learning how to acquire these tools, but not only how to acquire them, but then how to use them in appropriate situations. So it's so interesting hearing you think back and be like, oh, this was actually what I was feeling. And who the hell knows what would have happened differently if you knew how to convey those messages or have the courage or whatever the thing it would be. That I think it really comes from. I don't even think it's so much more courage at that point. It's like the gap between being able to feel confident enough to be brave enough is I just my skill set is it's just too far. I don't
mm,
have that ability to do this. I'm not sure if my whole life would just fall upside down, but what I do know is I do know how to protect my friend. I do know how to do that, and that's as far as my confidence level can go. I feel, and we go fight or flight all the time because
mhm.
when we're feeling a certain way. Um, wow, that was half anticipating you and the guy's brother. You said was going to
Mhm.
be in a fight in the back of the same van. I was like,
Mm.
oh man, you're going to double down right now and go one after the other. But holy smokes, how did your how did your relationship evolve with your father after that? I think that that's so. I mean, I was feeling it right here when you're like, "Whew, that's heavy." At some people, that doesn't mean a lot to them. Like they're used to saying "I love you" and all that. I'm saying from personal experience, I don't think I said "I love you" back and forth to my family till my 30s, to my late 20s, early 30s. So like, I understand like not like this is just not something you don't do, or not so much there's not love there, but that ability to express in the way that's maybe needs it needs to happen that way. Some people are like, oh well, you don't need to hear it. It's like you just know. Like, no, some people need to hear it to know. It's
Mm.
like, okay, could you confirm this for me? Like is that what I'm reading? How how did the relationship evolve after that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think just to parlay on what you said, I think as kids, we need much more to understand that we are loved. We have a developing brain, right? And this, um, we really understand what we see, right? So I didn't see a bunch of love from that. And I saw discipline, I saw anger, I saw lack of communication, I saw frustration, and that kind of laid itself on me. And now as a parent, I've learned from what I believe my dad's shortcomings were, and I maybe go too far, and I always tell my kids I love them. And I think that some people think that love can be a weakness, an emotional weakness, but it's such a strength. Like, I will do anything for someone I love. I will go to death for someone I love. And so I believe that emotion can be so powerful. And I can go also from the other things that I had which were all I knew at a limited time, right? Was violence and fight or flight. I was going into the fight, but now I use that for protection, for protecting people that need it, for teaching people to never be bullied, to teach people to have self-confidence and awareness so we can flip that, right? My relationship with my dad, as I moved out and over time, got better because I think he had a vision that I needed to be on my own and struggle in order to become a man. And maybe just his way of going about it wasn't the most, it wasn't the smoothest, it wasn't the most articulate, but it got better as we went. And one thing my dad did, which was unbelievable, my mother didn't really know the depth of my despair and what had happened in that confrontation. And my dad did. I had to confess to him because I had to go to court, and he provided a lawyer. And the day that we drove to the courthouse, when I had to go and get arraigned before the judge, it was about a half-hour drive, and we didn't say, it was just my father and I, and he did not speak one word to me. And I just sat there petrified, not knowing what the judge was going to say, my father disowning me, if my mother was going to find out, if I was going to get sentenced to jail, what was going to, so many things for a 19-year-old to be thinking of. And we got to the courthouse, and my dad had an attorney waiting for us. And so he did things like that he would never verbalize and even tell me, which were amazing that he did. But our relationship started getting better as he, I believe, saw me turning into more of a man and having adult decisions being made on my own and change. Because it had to be frustrating for him to go, in my way, I'm doing the best I can to help this person, this boy, become a man, and all he's doing is getting friggin' trouble over and over and doing these stupid things. I've taught soldiers how to become soldiers. I've taught people how to deal with warfare. Why is this not working for this idiot? And it had to be super frustrating for him. He never said that, but in hindsight, as an adult, I probably think that's what it would be if I put myself in his shoes. And then as I started making better choices in my life, as I started contributing, as I started helping, in its way, it reflected to him that I was now becoming more of a man, that I was becoming more responsible. So our relationship opened up in communication. And if we fast forward all the way to the end of his life at 80 years old, my dad had passed away with cancer. We really made amends and understood each other and were able to communicate. And I believe it came full circle where he was actually proud of me and the things I was doing. So there was a definite evolution.
Wow. Appreciate you sharing that. And it made me think of this. I heard this recently. It was a quote, and he said there's the three stages of kind of a son's relationship with his father. I'm going to assume it transcends beyond that, more like child to parent, something like that. But what I was hearing there is almost the stages. He said, "What first you idolize them, then you demonize them, and then you humanize them." And I was hearing that evolution, that reconciliation, that understanding, and even just how you're describing now, like, huh, if I had been in war, if I had been in these situations, if I had to, hmm, hmm, and maybe presented the same things, I might have ended up the same way. It's
Right.
it's. I think there's a lot of beauty in that, the description of that evolution, but not only just your story, but I think there's something that everybody can learn from what you shared there. Is that I think so often we think we are so separate from the person across from us, especially the person that we may or may not deem as our enemy, but we're not aware of all the circumstances that led up to that moment. And not we it's so foreign to us, bringing back that ignorance piece, to know, like, what would it have felt like, and what were the opportunities that were posed to me at those times, and to say I might have chosen the same. I
Right.
might not be kind of the same as this person that I so despise, at least in this moment. Of course, it's hard, but I'm suggesting here, to be able to see yourself in your enemy is so difficult, because when you're in that fight or flight state, it's raw emotion. There's a lot of heated energy. it's so hard to cool yourself off, take a step back and go, what's really going on here? How can we approach this with a level head so we don't just destroy each other in the process? Because to destroy them, in a sense, if we can wrap our head around this concept, is to also destroy ourselves. And we
100%.
like, I think about everything you shared there. If you hadn't gone on that process of humanization, you would have missed out on that reconciliation. There, an element of closure that I think is so important because it closes this loop. And in my estimation, I think a lot about like the generational healing. I've been talking a lot about generational health as my mission. If you don't close the loop and you don't fully learn, well, you didn't learn, so you're going to pass it on in ignorance potentially
Hmm.
to the next path. So I think there's so much courage in being able to go into that final phase. And that's what I was hearing. That's why I was so curious about, like, how did that shift in that? So that was so cool to hear that.
I think part of it, to just really refine it, is as I worked on myself more, I got to a better place, more confidence, more open, where then I could look across without eyes that are clouded by anger, with eyes that were clouded by past transgressions or whatever, and go, okay, is it possible that this person is doing the best they can with what they have? Can I have some empathy for their situation? And this happens in everything in life. And to make it very specific, when my dad was in his later years, before he passed away, he opened up. Listen, there was no such thing as PTSD when I grew up. It was just my dad woke up with night terrors screaming, and I have no idea what he was dreaming about. He never would talk to us about it. Wake up sweating. He had malaria in Vietnam. He'd get a fever a couple times a year, and it would all kind of coincide. But he opened up some albums of war pictures. And what I saw in those albums made me understand why he would never talk about any of this. It's not what Hollywood portrayed or in this whole glamorous thing. And one thing that stood out in my mind, and it's weird, the other things, this trumps other things that were there, but it was in Korea, and there was an absolute mountain of human bodies and mixed in with livestock, cattle, horses, and they were pushing it with a bulldozer. And he said that the stench was so bad that they had to push it off a cliff after about a week with a bulldozer. And they documented this stuff with black and white photos. And I'm like, I try to put myself in that place and go, what would it smell like to smell 100 rotting corpses and livestock and all that, and deal with that when you're in your early 20s and had to deal with all the things that you didn't have in your childhood or have a father and all of that. And it'll go, yeah, fuck. Yeah, I understand how you can act that way. And I have some compassion for this. And let me get out of my own way right now and get out of my own ego and go to the other side of the table and have some compassion for somebody else. I'm so focused on what I don't have. I'm so focused on woe is me. How about having a little compassion for somebody else? And doing that, it helped me heal and it helped us heal together.
Wow. One of my most, I'm going to call it favorite aspects of this, but a better word is just like one of the things that continues to make me grateful for the process of this podcast thing, whatever this is to hear stuff like what you just shared, because it reminds you, go, shit, my life ain't that bad. My
Right.
problems are minuscule compared to something like that. There's literally war torn areas in the world right now. And to wrap my head around that, I've never been in that kind of space. Holy shit. And you can see how that, especially like you think kids or all that. My wife is in a city school, and she sees some wild stuff. And whew, those are kids. Man, we'll call it a functioning adult who's worked through some things in his life, but and has some tools and is surrounded by people who could help him navigate. But holy smokes, do you feel like for these kids or for anybody in any of those situations, or to be a soldier or anything, oh my God, it just reminds me, like, man, for people to share these stories, like for people to feel safe enough to share that, man, there's there's a strength to be able to say, hey, this is some of the things, this is some of my darkness. Here you go. Here's some clarity on why things are the way they are. I think there's a weird gift in seeing other people's darkness and go, appreciate what you got, man. Your problems are just your problems. It is what it is. And everybody's got some darkness in there. So wow, thank you for sharing that. That was well, it's always humbling to hear those types of things, to say, huh, it could be different. It could be really different really quickly if we're not careful to mind ourselves.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
yeah. What what were some of the things that you did? Obviously, fitness became part of your life in
Mhm.
a strong way. What was some of the other avenues you explored in terms of this personal development path? I'm a bit of a wellness junkie, so
Mhm.
I've gone and done them all the things. So, and I say all the things, but like, I showed my buddy, I'm making a t-shirt that says wellness junkie on it. And I've used the term a few times, and I was at my chiro that she's like, I really like that. I told my buddy, and I made him, I showed a shirt. I was like, I would buy that. And I'm like, all right, I guess I got to roll with this. Like,
There
um,
you go.
what long way of coming back to, what were some of the things that you did for yourself? What are some of the tools or the avenues explored on your, let's call it, healing journey?
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you one that I didn't know. I went into it not thinking about, man, this is going to heal me. I went into it with a whole different perspective. And it wasn't until I came out of it that I realized that, wow, that for me was such a healing process, such introspect. So always looking for my father's adoration and attention, which I couldn't get. I was into fitness. I love fitness as my vocation, but I didn't take a hiatus ever from training, but I delved into acting. And I was in Southern California. I moved there. I always had aspirations of being in fitness magazines and doing the Joe Weider stuff and everything. And so I moved to the Hollywood area and I started getting into fitness magazines and all that. And I had a secret that I wanted to get into acting, but I never had the bravery to ever tell anybody. My friends would have probably thought it was cool, but in my mind, they're going to be like, you pussy, you want to do something like that? Well, I mean, what are you, crazy? So I had to go and start learning about myself and learning about why I do certain things. And I had people peeling back the layers of who I was because I had to learn about me in order to project it. And I started studying acting, and it was crazy. I put the same work ethic that I did into my fitness business, and I became super successful at a very quick pace. I ended up being on like every soap opera. I had reoccurring roles on different soap operas where I met Sebastian Maniscalco. I was on Days of Our Lives. I acted with people that probably don't even know who this person is now, but she was a superstar. I was on a show with Pam Anderson. I did
Oh, I
movies. I
know
did,
Pam Anderson.
yeah. And so here's this kid from a little farm town of 2,000 people that grew up and had a turbulent childhood and got arrested. I went into fitness. I did all this stuff. And then I went into acting, looking for accolades. I'm like, my dad can never, ever not pay attention to me if I'm on the fucking silver screen or I'm in the show. And I became super successful. I did some crazy stuff. I told you this isn't a common wellness journey. I was the Dolce Gabbana guy opposite of Giselle and I was international all over. And this is a freak of nature and why I have such a message to people that anything is possible. I didn't say it, but it's absolute fact. In my freshman year of high school, I was 4'11", and I ended up growing to 6 foot by a freak of nature by the time I was a senior. I was 4'11", 90 pounds. My mother cut my hair. I had a bowl cut and I had a healthy, nice case of acne. So if I can
Crushing
go
it.
as a freshman year being 4'11" to being the Dolce Gabbana guy in my 20s and being with Giselle of Tom Brady Giselle fame, I want people to know anything is possible. But one of the best wellness things I did was learning about myself, peeling down the layers of why I do certain things, why certain emotions were easy for me to access, like anger, frustration, and stuff. And while certain things, they had to find out why it was difficult for me to access love or emotions that were tender or so, but I needed to access them for that profession. So I went into that. I became pretty successful. And then I got to a point where I realized I didn't enjoy it. And
Mm.
I actually turned down, and there's specifics in my book where I got offered a contract to be on a mini series where I didn't have to audition. They offered me the part And I had been fighting for all these years of going to this audition and getting 1 out of 100 and, taking these little, I was officer number 1 or thug number 2, and I get offered a part on a miniseries. And the week before the offer came in, I had a realization as I sat in an audition room, and I was like, man, I dearly miss my wife and I miss my kids. My second son had been born, and I'm sitting here and I'm not enjoying this process anymore. I achieved what I want to achieve out of this, and I saw it wasn't necessarily for me. Doesn't mean it can't be for somebody else, but I describe it as like an Easter bunny. It was all shiny on the outside, and inside I felt hollow when I did it, when you crack that Easter bunny chocolate thing open. And I'm not getting satisfaction from this. And what I really love and my passion is seeing people change their lives when I work with them, making progress and being in that part, in that role as a coach and a mentor and a trainer. And I said, you know what? I think I've done enough here. And I called my agents and I said to them, I said, thank you so much for all you have done for me. It has been an amazing journey. I'm going to send lunch over to the whole office, but I think this is it for me. I want to walk away from this. And so I believe in a higher power. I believe in God and everything. And I've been tested many times in my life. So I went through that whole journey over the course of maybe 7, 8 years, maybe a decade. And literally the next week, I get a call and they say to me, my agents say, look it, I know you just retired and you called it quits, but we just got an offer for you. You have to understand, you don't have to audition. A director you worked with twice before is offering you a role on a miniseries. It's going to be 8 to 12 weeks of work, which is a good chunk of money. You're going to shoot in San Diego. They're going to take care of everything. And the craziest thing is the miniseries was about the life of God, of Jesus. And I was going to be like in that, not as Jesus, but in connection with that. And I go, are you kidding me? And I said, you know what? I have to tell you something. I thank you so much for the offer. And any other point in my life, I would accept, and I would be throwing a party right now, but I have to respectfully decline. I know what my path in life is. I know what makes me happy. I know what my role is. I don't need to prove anything to anybody. I don't need accolades from anybody anymore. And I said, thank you, but I'm going to respectfully decline that. And I have my career as a trainer skyrocketed after that. And so many opportunities happened for me. And if you have a happiness meter, like my happiness meter went from about a 5 or 6 to being pretty damn happy pretty consistently. And that is one of the wellness things I did that forced me to have introspect, to force me to learn about different emotions, and really opened up and peeled back the layers of who John Petrelli is. And I don't know if you've ever heard about that technique before, but it took me about a decade, and that's the technique I used.
I love that. I used to have like similar feelings about acting, not in that me having like some dire pursuit to it, but I took a couple film and lit classes in high school just because it was part of my thing. Just even starting to think about, I think the first time I saw The Masks We Wear, it's a documentary, perhaps you've seen it. It's a great one. It's actually it's mostly on like male depression, essentially.
Okay.
If I'm properly categorizing it, but that's the long and the short of it. But The Masks We Wear, and I think about a lot of even my own life. We kind of just try on personas, like going here now. I'm going to try this one on. Let's see what this is like when you have to learn how to sell, or you have to learn how to like you're practicing a new set of languages, like new words. You're using a new sequence. How do you emote? All of those things. I started thinking, like, I have a different appreciation for what actors must do, because you're good actor. I guess we can all see what a quote unquote bad actor is. It's like you look like you're trying too hard, and then the great actors, you're like, I completely forgot that you're a different person. Like in quote unquote real life, you're not. You were the character, and the idea of embodying all of that stuff, especially when I started thinking about like method acting, like you're gonna just walk around and just be that character all the time. That's insane. And but I guess the long and short of what I'm saying here is like that's actually a very cool way of thinking about personal development, to try on different characters in a strange way. I feel like would allow you to look back on the other character you had because you're technically outside of that. Like, oh, that
Hmm.
was what was going on, because you and maybe in some ways have to engage with it in maybe another character or within yourself or whatever it is. But that's very cool. That was that was part of your process of the healing. Wow. That's really cool. That's really cool. What that's a hell of a journey off into
Yeah,
meeting
pretty
some
unique.
interesting people. Like, yeah. Wow.
And one thing I've go ahead, finish your thought.
No, I was going to move on to other thoughts. I want to hear what your thought is.
So one thing I really found out too is that everything is not what you, well, I don't want to put my perspective on other people's thought process, but I had different visions of what certain actors would be or wouldn't be. Like
Mm.
I had, um, I put it in my book and I couldn't name names because I would legally potentially be in trouble, but there was an action hero that I grew up with, and he was like the biggest action hero. And I, as a kid, had a paper route and I went to pay paper route money to go see the movie. It was so good. I put another $5 of my paper route money right after to see it again. So I talk about idolization, and I was into martial arts early on, and this person did martial arts and he saved the girl and he beat up the bad guys. And then I have like 4 different interactions with this individual, and I find out this is not true. This is what you see on screen. This person has got a lot of demons and they're trying to work through their own stuff and not treating people good and not treating people kindly. And so I had all these epiphanies too, to go, fuck, man, we think or may think these things of certain people, and their life is not all roses either. They're human beings, and we all have these common threads. We need love. We need to share. We need to feel that we're needed. We need compassion. And that, whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, a fireman, a teacher, or an actor, those things, if you don't fulfill those needs, are going to act out. And until recently, man, think about this with celebrity. They have been under a microscope for years of what now all of society is really finding out to be true. You screw up once, you're on camera, right? Back in the day, there wasn't camera pointed at everybody, but there was a camera pointed at certain people that were in that profession. And now you say something nowadays and you screw up and you're 16, you could be paying for that when you're 36. And so I've learned to have a little bit, give people more latitude from it, because go look at, man, if a camera had been pointed at me so many times in my life, people can define me as X, Y, or Z. And that one moment does not define my life. One moment doesn't define your life, and don't allow it to define your life, because we should be evolving. So it's one other thing I learned about that profession is everything isn't what it seems. Give people some latitude and understand that if your life was underneath a microscope too, there may be some things that they find out that could be, uh, not perfect.
Mm. I mean, I think it keeps coming back to this empathy thing. I think a lot about that just in elements of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody who, most people who listen to this podcast are entrepreneurs, um, and have been for years, at least from what they tell me. Um, um, truth be told, I only have now started to learn of a few people who actually listen to the podcast. Aside from knowing that my mom listens to the podcast, that's
Uh-huh.
about it.
Hey,
They don't
mom.
pay.
Yes.
Hi, mom. Yeah. Uh, Pay attention to any of how many downloads, any listens. I purely do this because I just enjoy it. I think it being that for the majority of my adult life, I've been a business owner. Um, I think not a lot of people think about that, and I'm equating this like if you're under the microscope or you're the person that everybody's looking to because you've assumed some role of responsibility, and I think
Mm-hmm.
it's no different than parents. As kids, I think it comes back to that same thing of idolization. Well, I'm idolizing you. You're supposed to know everything. You mess up once, like gotcha. Well, maybe they weren't coming down on you all those times because they just had to pick and choose. Like, you're a kid, or you're a client, or you're just in that stage right now, not knowing that they're thinking about that thing because you don't have the life experience or the wherewithals or the you've never assumed that role. You don't know how to have the empathy to be able to go, oh, that's actually what's going on here. This
Mm-hmm.
this is the thing. Um, I heard this from it was kind of an evolution of a life coach or something I heard once talking about is like you can only, or maybe I've adapted it to my own thing, but you can only lead people as far as you've gone yourself. And
Mm,
namely because like if you haven't been in the space, like how can you really tell people what's going on there from a place of confidence? Because you also can't, that's where it came from in the thing, the coaching space. And I think he was talking more from like life coaching sentiments of like if you haven't seen certain elements of life or you haven't evolved to a certain level of maturity, we're going to call it
hmm.
that, spiritual growth, which I believe all growth is spiritual growth. That was also from this course I had taken. Um, you haven't gained the ability to zoom out far enough to get enough above the forest to see the whole thing. You're still stuck in the trees. So I think what you're talking about there is so important in essentially empathy because it comes back to the same thing we were talking about before. If you can't see yourself and your enemy, you can't see a way to the resolution because you're just so stuck in like my way. And that's such an immature way to look at what, and don't get me wrong, we get into the moments. And of course you're going to have those moments because we're going to all feel like we're being attacked at something. And I think it's just part of the human condition. We have to learn how to evolve through that. Um, yeah, I love, wow, did not anticipate acting being part of the conversation today in that element. That was cool. That was really cool.
I didn't anticipate it either.
That was cool, man. I'm curious a little about I think one of the most unsung things in business ownership, or really just in life, is our relationship at home, our spouse. And I say this because I feel like 99% of my job really is talking to people about how to navigate their home life, and namely, how do you talk to your partner?
Hmm.
I loved like you've been here with your wife clearly for a long time now. Like, tell me the kind of like how that relationship, especially through the stuff you've been through, like what role has that served for you, and how have the two of you continued to grow together? How do you navigate that with all of these different, I mean, you've clearly had a very dynamic life. There's a lot of moving parts with that. And anybody who owns a business can attest to like there's a lot of people pulling you in a lot of different directions or acting the way you had just talked about, like, wow, getting those types of opportunities. I'm curious about how that's all played out.
Yeah. So I met my wife who's my wife now, my wife Cheyenne. We are going on 28 years together. We were together for 10 years before we got married. So we've been married 18 years, and she has been a support system. If there's one thing that is steady, is she has supported me in whatever I wanted to go after and do, and which is incredible. Now, there are different evolutions of John Petrelli that I have been better at certain roles and growing at certain roles, or not so good in certain roles. And I can tell you that she is the yin to my yang. Like she gives me balance in a sense. Like if I'm in, I'm all in. I'm going for it. I go after everything 100%. And sometimes she has been the coach on the outside to see things and go, okay, maybe you need to back this down, or maybe have you thought about that? And every once in a while, I get this great idea and I go, baby, I have this great idea. I could do this for business or whatever. And I tell her to her, and she's like, that is a great idea. Except I told you that about 8 months ago. And you're just remembering it now. And she's normally right. And but she has consistently been there for me. It's not that we don't have our arguments. It's not that we don't disagree on stuff. But one thing that has kept the glue together is I have such respect for her and I have such love for her. And we have made agreements that if we get into something emotional or heated argument, we don't ever take it to go to bed at night or angry. I'll say, look, we'll pick this up in the morning. I love you dearly and we'll work this out. I don't know how right now, but we're going to work it out and we're not going to bed angry. At the end of the day, something that you said earlier is I try to have perspective. We try to have perspective as a couple. We don't have bombs blowing off over our heads. We don't live in a country where we have to live in a cardboard box, or our circumstances are pretty damn good. And somebody always has it much tougher than what we're going through. And for us, faith is a big thing. I went away from faith for a while. She has brought me back to it, to understand that I cannot do all these things on my own. I have not done these things on my own. And when I thought someone was there, I was abandoned and no one was there, that there were people watching over me. There's no way, if you go through the history of my life, that there has not been a higher power guiding me. We didn't talk about it, but I have guns pulled on me twice. I almost drowned in Alaskan waters by myself as I fell out of a boat in Alaskan waters. Yes, at nighttime. And I made it out of there. I've literally skated death at least a dozen times. I got airdropped into British Columbia, Canada. I was on one of the first reality shows and they dropped me into British Columbia, Canada. And I lived out there for 15 days, getting my own food and going down rapids, class 5 rapids in a boat I made out of driftwood. And there's so much craziness that if I look back, there is no way that I should be alive unless there was a bigger, higher calling for me. There's a bigger purpose for me. And so, I think the biggest key I can give anybody is communication, compassion. If I get into a physical confrontation, Caleb, it's because my verbal communication has failed, right? And we need to communicate. So much we have in common. There's so many common threads between people that we look and focus on the things that separate us. What are the common threads? We all want the same stuff. And can we work this out? Once again, we can agree to disagree, but with my wife, I'm not going to bed mad. I'm waking up and I'm saying, I love you and we'll work this out. So she's been my rock, dude. And there's been times in my life where I've been so selfish and she has really stood there with me. And I just feel grateful. I feel grateful for so many things in my life.
Dude, I love that. Like I said before, I think one of the unsung things to true success is the partnership that we choose to really like grow and like build a life with through our life. I think we're in a strange time in history where it's a little flippant how people decide to go about it. Like, yeah, it's more for like to check the box and to impress everybody else, but like you're building something together, and you can choose to grow together, you can choose to grow apart, and it's a choice. And I think that some of the things you just shared there, I'm making this commitment to like not go to bed angry. We will figure it out. Some of those things that I was hearing there is like, no, we're going to choose to keep coming back together. We're going to choose to continue to grow this life together. I think that it's so powerful, and I really appreciate you sharing that, because there's no way you could have gotten through some of those things without also having a incredible partner to share it with, to probably
100%.
save you from yourself a few times. And I'm going to make sure to tell my wife not to listen to that part of this. She doesn't listen to the podcast, but especially the part where you said, my wife told me a couple of times, I told you that 6 months ago. She rubs that one in my face all the time. So I was like, oh, I feel you, bro. I feel you.
I'm finally hearing it. Yeah, man. If we flash forward, I can kind of give you the biggest example. And I tell people that I've been paralyzed twice in my life. We talked about the first one in my youth where I was mentally paralyzed, but I was actually physically paralyzed in 2021, in December 2021. And we can get into the story if you want. It definitely shows how my wife is my rock, because I ended up getting physically paralyzed where I was in the ICU for 10 days and I could only move my eyeballs. And it started with my feet and my hands going numb. And I didn't say anything to anybody. I didn't tell my wife. I didn't tell my kids. And I just kept grinding and going to work. And I'm like, this is going to pass. And then after about a week and a half, I woke up and my vision was blurry. I can no longer read my phone. And I tried to go pee and I couldn't go pee. I lost my urinary stream. So I broke down and I confessed to my wife in the morning. I go, look, this stuff has been going on for about 2 weeks. And I have work today. When I get home, I'm going to see about 8 people. We should probably go to the doctor and get checked out. And this is the yin to the yang. My wife goes, no, baby, you're canceling work and you and I are going to urgent care and we're going to get this checked out now. And so thank God for that, because by the time we even were going to the car to go to urgent care, my body was being drained like a double A battery, losing energy. I could no longer shake hands, and she had to help me walk to the car. So we go to urgent care and she has to help me in, and we get into the examination room. They start doing different tests, and I have no more reflex You know how they hit the hammer on your knee? That's gone. On my elbow, it's gone. And just giving me tests, I faint in the emergency room, in the urgent care. And I'm not a person that faints. So they wake me up, they finish the examination, and the doctor goes, listen, I don't want to scare you, but you may have a rare autoimmune disorder, either MS, which is multiple sclerosis, or GBS, which I'd never heard of. It's called Guillain-Barré Syndrome. He goes, I don't have the ability to test you here, but I'm going to send you down to an emergency room right down the street in the hospital. They're going to be waiting for you. You're going to go get a spinal tap, and they're going to draw the fluid out of your spine, and they're going to test for a specific protein to see if you have this. So by the time we go drive a mile down the street, I need a wheelchair to go into the emergency room. Now, here's a guy, Caleb, that has been defined by my physicality for 30, 40 years. I do all these physical things. I help people be physical. And now that is going. And now I got to rely on my mentality to help navigate this. They put me on an examination table. They pull the fluid out of my spine. And while they're waiting for the test to come back, which takes about an hour, I take a 20-minute nap, and I wake up, and now I can no longer feel from my waist to my toes. I have zero sensation. I have zero motor skills of that. And they go, we're going to bring you up in the ICU, because if this ascends up your body, it's going to shut your heart and lungs off, and you're going to be on life support. And this is all happening within a couple hours span. So they put me in a wheelchair. They bring me up to the elevator to the ICU. And this is going to go back to what I said earlier. They're wheeling me down the ICU, and I see people in different rooms in different states of disarray. There happens to be someone that is in there in the ICU from an automobile accident. There's an elderly person that may not make it from COVID. And when I was in a place in my youth, I would have gone, woe is me. Why is this happening to me? But thank God this stuff happened to me in my youth. Thank God I went through all these trials, because now I was able to go in a state of mind and go, I don't know what this is. I don't know why this is happening, but I'm never going to complain, and I'm going to find a way out of here. I don't know how, but I'm going to find a way out of here. And they wheel me to the ICU, and over the course of 10 days, I get to a point of paralyzation where I can no longer move any part of my body except my eyeballs. I can't even turn when the neurologist comes into the room to even look to see who's there. There's a whole story behind it where I soil myself, I get catheterized, I code out. They have to bring every doctor on the floor to bring me back. And I do a couple things. I want to give people some tools if they listen to this and take away. I do a couple things that I believe absolutely changed that experience and was able to get me out of there and navigate me out of there. Number one is I make a decision that I am going to fill the room of the hospital with positive vibrations. And for me, that's Bob Marley, Ziggy Marley. I don't want to name drop, but Ziggy was one of my clients for 20 years. I love his music. It makes me feel a certain way. So instead of hearing the moans and all the things associated with the ICU, whether it's a beeping heart rate monitor or someone in despair, I want to hear these positive things that bring me to a certain place mentally, because physically I got nothing left. Number two is my wife, who's the yin to my yang, goes, we are not going to nourish you on a cellular level with chicken fingers and French fries, which is an atrocity, is what they have in the hospitals. I am on a mission to help change that. I want to help doctors, nurses, patients all get nourishing food in their state that they need it the most when they're in the hospital. So I have no longer the ability to swallow. She goes home and purees me organic foods and brings it to me for every meal in the hospital. So now I'm getting positive vibrations from music. I'm getting nourished on a cellular level. And then I pray and meditate my ass off every day. And I envision my body healing itself. I kindly ask my body to stop attacking its own nerve endings. That's what GBS does. It eats the myelin sheath on your nerves, and it takes away all your nerve endings, until I get to a point over 10 days where I'm commanding it to do it. Now, anybody can believe what they want to believe. I am not discrediting Western medicine. I loved my doctors, my nurses. I would have not have gotten out of there without them and the medication they gave me. But the fact that I believe a positive mindset, these tools that I use, meditation, prayer, breathing, all help me stay away from a dark place where I could have had so many opportunities where I'm laying at 2:00 in the morning in the bed by myself and I can't move and I'm only staring at the ceiling. And on several occasions, I can't reach the nurse's aid button because they put it too far, and I soil myself. in my room, and I'm sitting there dealing with some of the hardest things in my life, but I was able to get out of there. And in 10 days, they wheeled me out in a wheelchair. And then over the course of 3 to 4 months, I had to go from a wheelchair to a walker to a cane. But I was determined. At some points, I could only move my finger, brother. And I said, I'm not going to focus on the fact that I can't move my other fingers. I'm not focusing on the fact I can't move my toes. I am only going to move this finger until I can now move my next finger. And I focused on what I had as opposed to what I didn't have. And I rehabbed 7 days a week, 5 days with a therapist, 2 days on my own until I could get back to full functionality. And I know I'm talking a lot, but I want to get this message out to people. This is crazy beyond belief, but everything's possible. In that time, the guy that got arrested, the guy that has dyslexia, the guy that got passed in high school because they didn't want to see me anymore, the guy that had anger issues and fear issues and violence, here's a book and decides, how can I make something positive happen from this that will help other people? And I write a book, and I haven't written anything. And that book becomes a #1 bestseller on Amazon instantly. And I don't say this, Caleb, because I want to go, look at what I've done. Look at how great I am. No, I say this because I want people to know, if I can do this with my limitations, with being paralyzed, with being arrested, with having dyslexia, imagine what you can do. Imagine what you can accomplish. Imagine who you can help. Imagine who you can love much more than I can. And I just want everybody to know that everything and anything is possible if you're willing to use tools, if you're willing to be consistent, be patient, be kind to yourself. You can achieve anything. Anything.
You got me ready to run through a brick wall for you, brother. You got me fired up. That's such a heavy story, man. And it's so interesting you're talking about this, like you're being wheeled by these things. You're seeing almost like these montages of what could be, and that's going through your mind. Holy shit. I mean, and for anybody who questions the power of the mind, the fact that the placebo effect, or the nocebo effect for that matter, exists and is fully documented in all the trials and everything. If people can't wrap their mind around that, the fact that your mind in many ways can outperform pharmaceutical grade drugs on
Yes.
stuff, that's insane, but it's true.
Yes.
So I think what you're talking about there, and what I heard a lot of, especially, I don't know if you got into psychedelics or anything like that, but that's been part of some of my journeys, is that all that, especially with that, it's like set and setting. You set the space, the music, the setting, the food. Like you are putting your body, essentially, you're putting your body in an environment that could stand up to whatever was really going on. And I think there's a deeper thing to that. That I think that most people would never even think about what stacked up to that point. You had to already have worked very hard to put the right people in your life who would take the right steps, who know what to do, to not just from like, oh, let's just take you to the hospital. Like, no, this is the things we're going to do because this is aligned with our values and our goals and how we go about life. That's all that other work we talked about, that consistent work from, who knows, a couple decades of work that nobody saw.
Right.
Could you really be like, oh, it was that one day where we were there having that one conversation? No, you couldn't, because it was all these really small acts that I don't think people think about. It's not always just like winning a fucking lottery or getting, the big role in the whatever. Sometimes it's, oh, catastrophe hit, and I had the tools in place to navigate it. In fact, I
Mhm.
would go so far as to say it's probably more of that in life, that you could navigate mass discomfort, because also success comes with its own discomforts. We see plenty of people torch their lives. They win the lottery, 3 years later they're broke again, or
Mhm.
celebrities who torch their lives all the time. The more common one, but not thought of as to why you need to build a base, because we get caught up in chasing as opposed to building a foundation, is just dealing with the potential traumas of life, the health stuff, the relational stuff, the business stuff. It's the day-to-day stuff that seems so happenstance, and it's not under the it's not in everybody's newsfeed.
That's right.
That I thought was I felt like that really to me highlighted everything you're talking about. Like, oh yeah, here I was. If I had talk mindset, yeah, but that was decades of work to be capable of navigating a situation, like to not only navigate it, but then come out and have the capacity or more the inclination to be like, I'm going to write a book because I'm going to make this mean something more than just me. I just think that I hope people take that from this. And that I think a lot of people also don't see that the current struggles in their journey right now might be leading to that. That might actually be what this moment is preparing you for. We don't know what it is. I hope to God they don't have to go through something like you just went, because that sounds like it sucked. But there's going to be everybody's going to have their version of suck. So I think that that was really a beautiful portrayal of the timeless effort you've been putting into not in just to yourself, but into the relationships you've cultivated around you in being able to respond in the way they needed to in a time of true emergency. Because if people were out of sorts, then like it'd be a big, I mean, it would be a travesty. It'd be true travesty. But that man, that's a really inspiring story. And I think I think the other side of it, which really resonated with me, was how you had kind of the commitment to letting go of being defined by your body, by your physicality. That one, that like, because you started off early into that, like, this is what I had built my business, but I had to rely on something else, the internal, which is so hard when you're in an external focused industry.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that gets the show. But I think what hopefully this better illustrates is that I think what people think they're buying is the idea of what you're going to feel like, or what the tools you think you're going to have on the inside. But we don't really want to say that that's what we're trying to build, because it's not as attractive. It might be a little sensitive. The current friends group are around might, like you said before, call you a pussy and be like, yeah. But man, I think that's truly beautiful. And I think there's a lot of love. I think there's a lot of unconditional self-love in there, which also, like, as I said, to hear you say, I came out of this wanting to write a book to support, to just inspire others. There's, it's an unconditional giving of love as well, externally. So I thought it was just, holy smoke, man.
Well, thank you. Can I add one thing that you really sparked that you were just saying that really, and I want
Please
people
do.
to understand this. You may be out there in a tough time right now. You may be in a dark place, but understand, if I didn't sleep on floors, if I didn't only have a couple $100s to my name and was eating cans of tuna, if I didn't get arrested, if I didn't have the epiphany through violence that I didn't want to create violence anymore, if I ended up in that hospital at an earlier point in my life, paralyzed, I may not have made it. So all of those dark places, all of those tough times, I look back and they're now my best times, because they prepared me for the thing that was I needed down the road. So if you're in a dark place, whatever that may be, whatever you're dealing with, understand that you're going to make it through. You're going to take tools from that, and those tools are going to serve you somewhere down the road that you can't even envision. I would have never envisioned that I would have been paralyzed in my life, and it happened. So please be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself as you would be to other people. Continue to learn, continue to explore new things, and understand these tough times won't last, but you will. And they're going to help you down the road in a way you never thought possible.
I could see why they wanted to have you on that role. You get me fired up. You're a good speaker, man. I love it. You do public speaking on different places?
So that's a great question. So right now I'm educating myself on how to speak, and I just started. In fact, tomorrow I joined a thing called Toastmasters International. Is my first speak of it's called the Icebreaker. But I want to learn, like, I feel like I have this experience in my life, and I want to be able to verbalize it so people can absorb it, and I can help more people at a larger scale. So I want to get into public speaking. I want to get into motivational speaking. I feel like that's the next chapter of my life.
I love it. Yeah, I'm here for it. I've done a few talks here and there, and it's fun. It's going to suit you very well. That's why I think podcasting is so great, because I'll say this, especially, I think I've already told you, I think you should have a podcast. And I don't say the word should very often. But when it comes to this, especially in the coaching realm, what I have learned in hosting the podcast, because I do very well taking people's information, then like pushing back with my own thoughts, or like integrating with my own thoughts conversationally, very good. What, especially when I went on the path of Naked Sunday, like, where the hell am I going with my life? Um, into this more ethereal, spiritual thing. Um, the podcast, especially editing, I would go back and like, oh, these themes keep coming out, and it would start to package the stories, and it would start to, it helped. It just became more the practice of engaging and speaking and connecting. Um, I don't know. I mean, clearly you're crushing it on this podcast. So like,
Well, that's very
if there
kind.
was ever any other evidence, plus it's just fun to hang out with people. It's
I
so
agree.
much fun. Just talk to people like, wow, share your stories for a little while. I get to sit and listen. Like, man, it's awesome. It's a win round. I don't think there's any losses in it. So, yeah, I think that's going to be really cool for you to be speaking, man. I'm going to have to come attend one. That's going to be great.
Thank you, man.
Um,
Thank you.
I am looking at the time. I don't know if you got a little more time. I didn't even get to my fun questions yet. We got intense and we got deep, which I love. But if you got a little time, maybe we can close with perhaps some lightheartedness, or if
Let's
you got to
go,
roll.
brother. Let's go. Yeah.
So it's 3 questions, 3 fun ones. I don't think I've ever told people why I was inspired to start doing this. I've been always looking for like a fun, kind of like game showy side part of this, like a clip of all this. I think it's always fun to have lighter questions too. There's some deeper stuff, and I'll explain as to why I chose these questions as we go along with it. But we'll start off with what sports did you play when you were younger?
Mm-hmm.
That's 1A. 1B is how do you see, like, how did you play those sports, and how do you see um how do you see that still continuing in the way you either you live your life, run business, things like that to this day?
Great question. So I played just about every sport except football. My mom wouldn't let me play football. I was super small. As I said, I was 4'11" as a freshman in high school. The best sport I was at, not that you asked, was soccer. And I dominated at soccer. And I stopped playing soccer in I played at a high school level in 8th grade. We won the championship and everything. And I stopped because it wasn't cool. And I went to go and try play football. And that doesn't go well because you're 4'11". And the only thing I was good for was getting water for other players. And so because I didn't have the the courage or the self-confidence, I stopped playing soccer, but I loved it. What do I take from it in my adulthood is I 100% take the team aspect. I take the coming back from adversity. I take the learning how to fail, learning how to win graciously. Number one, really for me, as I look at it as an adult, is respecting. We call them opponents when we're on the field of game, but really respecting the other person across the table and giving them the respect they deserve. And that really brings out the best in you as an individual, because you want to perform your best as opposed to like competing against them. I just want to do my best to give them the respect they deserve. Man, I run off at the mouth a lot. What was your second part or part B of that?
That
That I
was
missed?
kind of that was the whole bit. You actually answered all the pieces. And the reason why I asked that question, in college, I studied kinesiology, and one of the classes, SUNY Cortland is well known for their phys ed department.
You went to
Phys ed,
Cortland?
yeah.
So did my sisters.
There we go. It's and then, as you
Cortico.
would know,
Yes.
Cortica just happened. Yeah,
Yeah.
as you would know, Cortland is known for their PE and their sports and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely have to call it PE, not gym, because they get real sensitive about that. I studied kinesiology. I actually went in as an athletic training major. I put very little, if any, effort into getting into college. I didn't even realize that they were very good at all those things. I just was good at school, and it just happened to be a thing. Anyway, switched over to kinesiology freshman year. on a whim. And there's more stories to that, but I won't go there. Um, one of the classes I took was this about play. And I kind of threw it to the side because I'm like, sports win. Like that's how my mind was wired about like, and then the discipline around that, but the free form play and thinking about how you go about playing or thinking about how you go going out about sport. Since I started asking this question, it's really cool for people to go, huh, this is really how I just go about my life. But I happen to hone it within a discipline. So it's why I really liked about the teamwork, but then also the opponent, how you engage this, how do you deal with people in real life? I think there's a lot to be said about putting kids in sports or just getting people into some type of discipline that forces you to like how do you play, especially a team sport. I think there's something
Mm-hmm.
deeply important about team sports long term in knowing how. I think there's a lot of value in solo sports. Don't get me
Sure.
wrong, but team sports, there's a lot of life lessons there. So I really loved everything about your response. I think there was a lot of cool stuff in that. Second question: what is your desert island movie and show? So you're on the desert island. Rest of your life, you can only watch one movie and one show. What would
Yeah.
those be?
So
What
you're
would it
not
be
going
and
to
why?
know this. It's hilarious. I'm wearing this shirt today, but there is if people this is an older movie, it's called The Last Dragon. Not Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee, but The Last Dragon with Bruce Leroy. And it was there's a character named Show Nuff, and I've seen that movie literally over 100 times, and I'd watch it again. It had such a big impact on me as a kid. There is some unique things to that I actually covered in my book. But The Last Dragon, check it out. It is a spoof on a Bruce Lee thing. And there was like black comedy spoofs that were going on at that time. And this is one of the best. I highly recommend it. So that one. And then the TV show, were you saying?
TV
So
show.
yep. So man, there's so many good ones. I've recently got back into this. I laugh my ass off with this show. My kids watch it. They're the only 9 and 12-year-olds that watch this. Sanford and Son.
All right, there we go. I don't think I've watched either of those things.
Do you watch? You know Sanford and Son? You're too young for that, aren't you?
Never got into it. I'm actually a pretty decent movie buff. And I know if you, I really kind of dispelled for a bit. I thought people got a little too serious about too many things, and I started to understand like, oh, wow, somebody took that much time to like lay this stuff out. And like, that's a lot of work, especially now that I edit things. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot of work, and to have
Mm-hmm.
thought through the layers of that to create to hopefully invoke a specific emotion in the audience that they will never see potentially.
Right.
That just hits me in a different way nowadays. I also didn't realize how much movies like I love like storytelling. I think, and then
Mm-hmm.
visually, like, and you're wrapping a lot of things all in one. So I think it's really really cool. Um, Plus, I like it. I mean, I always think like, well, why? What are you bringing with you to a desert island? Like, what you got? Nothing else. What is your idea of entertainment? I also think about like what types of movies and things mean to you. I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of movies like tell me a storyline that I follow with my life, that kind of stuff. So, all right, fun. I like this. Final question, and I'll wrap up both as to both all these how all these questions come together. Final question: what is your deathbed meal? That's
Mm-hmm.
3A, and 3B is who are you sharing it with and why?
Gotcha. My deathbed meal is my mom's. My mom makes her own sauce from tomatoes. She does about 500 jars a year, and her meat sauce with meatballs is phenomenal. I another reference you may not know, but I will beat Kobayashi in a meatball eating contest. Kobayashi used to win
I
all the
do know
Coney Island.
before Joey
Uh-huh.
Chestnut, right?
Yeah. And who I would like to share my last meal with is a few people. I don't know if I can cut it to one individual, but my family, including my father that has passed, my family and Jesus. That's who I would like to share that meal with because those are the most important people in my life.
I love that, man. So I'll share with you why these questions mean something to me,
Yes,
and
please do.
specifically why that last question means something to me. So those three questions, I think you'll really appreciate this, especially if we talk about your father. Those when I was younger, the most I've come to realize the most connected I ever felt. My father worked a lot. That's his artwork behind me there. He traveled a lot, was constantly busy, but I never didn't know he didn't love me. I always knew because he always made time, maybe once a month, once every 6 weeks, something like that. We would go out for a boys' night. We would go to Sports Authority. I don't know why I keep getting these emojis from my Apple update, whatever, the thumbs up stuff. We go to the Sports Authority, wander around there, maybe get some sports stuff, whatever, talk about whatever athletic things that was going on in my life. We would go have a meal. Usually it was like the Outback that was next door. And then we would catch a movie. So those three things all together to me
Wow.
is this feeling of connection to my life, but also those layers that I just told you. And I'll share this final layer with you. One, first and foremost, I love that it was your family you're talking about. I firmly believe world peace is going to be built one family dinner at a time. There's something so powerful about sitting down at a table and breaking bread with other people. And I think there's also something like you just have a bite to eat. You stop being so cranky. Like you can't really be angry on a full stomach. Like I feel a little
Right.
cozier. I think about my wife when she's hangry. She gives me
Right.
that death stare. I'm like,
Right.
I
Right.
am in
Right.
the crosshairs right now. But especially the deathbed piece. So I wrote this. I officiated my youngest brother's wedding almost 2 years ago now, and my speech is called "The Window in the Mirror." And in it, essentially, what I believe is that and I've also done a guided meditation called "Who's Holding Your Hand on Your Deathbed." So this is my more fun play on it. I believe that the idea, like in coaching, especially, your job is to hold up a mirror, as we talked about. They already know the answer, but you're giving it the perception of you're looking through. They're looking through a window, and I believe that on our deathbed, there's the classic saying, "The eyes are the windows of the soul." Well, window in the mirror, same concept comes right back up. When you look into people's soul, what you're really seeing is a reflection of where you're at. If you really look hard enough. And on our deathbed, I believe it's the highest climb in our personal development. We've reached our purpose, or we've reached our end thing. So I think it's really beautiful to say, "Hey, this is my family. What do they see?" And that's led to some interesting conversations in my life, especially when I consider who do I want there on my deathbed. What do they see? And not only that, what do they see in me now? Why do they love me now? And whenever I feel lost, I go back to asking them, why do they love me? And like, that's all because they're going to be the people on my deathbed. Those are the only opinions I need to concern myself with. Just do those things. And I guess this is my lesson to the world right now. It's like, I've watched the other progress that I thought that I was not getting somehow magically show up as well out of nowhere because I refocused on the things that were truly the greatest priority. So that's probably the most eloquently I've ever described the purpose of those three questions.
I love it.
But I wanted to share that with you because
Thank you
you
so
answered
much.
you answered them so gracefully. But you are awesome, man. Like I'm so grateful that Brandon put us together because this is the beginning of a friendship. I just can tell you've got more stories that I can't even wrap my head around right now. So I can't wait for some more.
Well, when you come and visit, man, we'll cover the rest
Yes,
of them. Yep.
absolutely, absolutely. We might have had to push back our thing, but I want to come out. I want to
I'm
come out
not
there
going
anyway.
anywhere whenever you want.
Yeah, man, feeling that love. Um, let's do this. Uh, how if somebody's been listening to this and they're like, I love this guy. I need more of him in my life. Maybe I need to get his book. Maybe I need to have him come speak on my podcast. Maybe whatever the thing is.
Mm-hmm.
What's the best way for somebody to connect with you?
Oh, it's great. So on Instagram, it's john.petrelli. On my website, it's johnpetrelli.com. And my book is everywhere from Amazon to Audible. The audio version has 3 extra hours of content. And I think it's pretty darn good, if I may say so myself. I feel like if you don't like it, I'll give you your money back. It's confessionsofahhollywoodtrainer.com is the website, or Confessions of a Hollywood Trainer is the name of my book. And man, I really thank you for giving me an opportunity to be here. I feel blessed. Thank you for this conversation. You made it so easy. And I look forward to the next time we talk, my brother.
Thanks, man. Well, with that, what are your final words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience today?
Sure. Literally this, whatever you want to achieve in life, it's absolutely possible. Surround yourself with people that are going to lift you up, that are going to hold you accountable. Be willing to work every day and just gather new tools every day that are going to propel you one step closer to where you want to be, and be patient and kind to yourself on that journey.
Couldn't have said it better myself, brother. And I'm not even going to try. So we're going to leave it at that. Everybody who's listening, don't worry. If you didn't catch all the stuff of how to connect with John, it's going to be in the show notes. So go do that. John, I love you, man. You're awesome. I am excited for this friendship to continue to grow. Super grateful for you to be in my life now. And wow, this was just great. So we'll
I feel
call
the
it
same,
there.
brother. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
man. Thank you. And everybody listening, go check out all that stuff. And until next time, I remind you to love everybody.